Hey, everybody, welcome to Breakfast All Day. Christy, Alonso, talking about Stillwater, the long-awaited sequel to Almost Famous. No, just kidding. This is Tom McCarthy's latest film, his follow-up to his Oscar-winning Spotlight. Matt Damon plays a dad whose daughter is in prison in France. Christy, tell us about it.
Yeah, that is one of many, many things happening in Stillwater. And I too was hoping for a behind the music of the band from Almost Famous, but no. Billy Crudup is too busy doing the morning show, season 2, so we had no time for this. So yeah, as we talked about in our news segment earlier, this is loosely based on the story of Amanda Knox, and Abigail Breslin plays this American college student who has been in a French prison for 5 years of her 9-year sentence. She was convicted in the killing of her lover, who was a young French Muslim woman. And so when we first see Matt Damon, he is working just odd jobs, manual labor. He's between oil rig gigs. He lives in the titular town in Oklahoma, where Oklahoma State is. And he's stoic, but not gruff. He's like mild-mannered. He's got the baseball cap and the bushy goatee. He listens to country music in his pickup truck, and he is very devoutly religious. Even if he's going to get tots and a cherry limeade at Sonic, he will still pray over it.
I admire his Sonic order. Footlong with chili, large tots, cherry limeade. That's what you get at Sonic.
Very specific. And so but then we see, a little more about him with each person he interacts with, including when he goes to France for what we find is a pretty regular visit to go see his daughter in prison. He stays at the same motel. They all know him. But during one of his visits, his daughter passes along to him a piece of information that she wants him to pass along to her lawyer, right? Because as we learn, once the letter gets translated from French, she doesn't really trust her dad to deal with this information. And basically, it's a piece of jailhouse hearsay that there is a young Arab man who is bragging about being the one who actually did it. And so Matt Damon takes it upon himself, or his character's name is Bill Baker. Bill takes it upon himself to investigate this on his own. And we learn a little bit more about him with each person that he encounters, including a woman who becomes his friend and his translator and his driver, played by, is it Camille Cottin? Is that how you say her name? She's a French actress.
She's on Call Your Agent,
which I've never seen. But
Call My Agent, whichever.
There are so many different movies going on here because it is sort of a procedural like Spotlight with a lot of knocking on doors and making phone calls and trying to piece together information to, investigate this piece of hearsay, this gossip. But it's also about a father-daughter relationship that is estranged, and we learn why that is. And it's also about the racial and socioeconomic disparities that exist in both France and the United States. It's also about our current political state in terms of Matt Damon's character is like this collection of red state, characteristics and quirks, and you think who that person is, but perhaps there's more to him than that. And then in the third act, it just goes off the rails based on this crazy coincidence and some really unwise decisions that I just could not go with. And what was the nicest part of it is him being involved with this woman and her little girl and having the possibility of second chances when it's the three of them interacting, or he has a lovely connection individually with both the mom and this little 9-year-old girl. And
played by Lilou Siavod.
Yes. In those quiet moments when there is the possibility of redemption, and Damon's good in this, like when he lets the character crack open just enough to let some hope and some vulnerability shine through. That's when this movie really works. And when it becomes this other whole crazy thing in the third act, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, it is frustrating because you're right. The domestic scenes of Damon's character, this woman who ordinarily he would never ever have met, much less be sort of getting into a relationship with, who's like a stage actress, and the concept of acting that isn't on television is completely foreign to him.
He calls it theater.
And her young daughter, Stillwater, like those are really lovely moments, and they start kind of adding up to something. Overall, like I couldn't escape the notion of what this movie becomes, and maybe this is my read and I could be totally wrong. I felt like Matt Damon is basically a metaphor for America in this movie, and specifically like how America deals with complicated foreign policy issues, which is we bumble in, try to take over, and make everything worse than it was before. Because that's what Matt Damon's character keeps doing every time he actively tries to get involved in the investigation of this guy and whether or not he, this is true and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, that's the least interesting part of the movie. And like the scenes with Abigail Breslin are okay, but like the everything tied to her and the prison and the murder investigation is far less interesting than him and the French lady and the daughter. But of course we don't get, they get pushed aside for more murder and more investigation and more crazy coincidences and for the big third act thing that happens. And it's just, yeah, you just sort of like, oh, okay, then I don't care about any of this. And it's like, we talked in the news segment about how Amanda Knox feels like they're exploiting, her story. And, and as I said then, I think there's a history of Hollywood telling these sort of like ripped from the headlines, but we've changed the names, kind of things. And I think if this were a movie that had as much dramatic impact as Spotlight, let alone the sort of like real world, kind of cultural and news impact of Spotlight, then you'd be like, well, yes, but look at what they made with it. But given that the movie itself is such a mess and so not interesting in so many ways, you kind of feel for Amanda Knox here. It's like, you're going to exploit this person and you're going to give us this for this? Come on, And
understatement is what Tom McCarthy does well. And that's what made Spotlight so good, was despite what the subject matter was that they were investigating, he was very methodical about it and about these reporters' work.
Sure.
And when he's just focusing on Matt Damon's character going through the day in and day out of his life, like that's more compelling. Him picking up this little girl from school and bringing her the same pastry every day, and then just having a nice conversation walking down the street, like that stuff, the realism, the understatement of that is more interesting than any of the wild stuff that it ultimately ends up being about. And I wonder what happened along the way that maybe folks didn't feel like the redemption arc was enough. I wonder what happened along the way that they felt like we've got to wrap it up with something big.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's worth noting that we haven't really talked about is that Damon's character is a recovering addict. And so much of his choices are about trying to not repeat the sins of the past. And so much of that has colored his relationship with the Abigail Breslin character. She was mainly raised by her grandmother because because her parents were not reliable and he was getting drunk or getting high or whatever. And so there's so much of this guy who his internal turmoil that he's playing out is that of somebody who is trying to stay on the straight and narrow, trying not to give into, indulgences of the past. And that's all really interesting. And that also kind of gets pushed aside for this more sort of outrageous plot stuff. And, let's never forget that Tom McCarthy made The Cobbler.
Oh, fuck.
Just going to throw that out there,
there's an interesting notion here because at different points, both the father and the daughter say life is brutal. And the daughter brings up the notion that her dad's a total fuck up and she is too. And they just can't escape that. And the idea of that being a screw up is hereditary, and the way in which that pushes against the feel good Hollywood urges of this movie, like that to me was interesting. Like the untidiness of that, the idea that like, okay, we're just doomed. But then the movie it ultimately gives into more feel good notions of, oh, there is a destiny out there. And there is a coincidence out there, and the universe is working for you out there, and here it is.
Yeah, the notion of like people who think that they don't deserve happiness because of their past or because it's somehow fated to them or whatever. Yeah, that's an interesting idea that the movie kind of sort of mainly pays lip service to, because by the end of it, you're sort of like, well, maybe you don't deserve to be.
Anyway, Damon's really good in it. He is. And
he is
very subtle. I hate to say the phrase, he disappears into the role, but it's like if Jason Bourne, is like the opposite of Jason Bourne, basically.
There are moments where I was kind of like, I had to sort of look for him in the guy, because the way like he looks so much like the kind of dude he's playing, this sort of like Oklahoma roughneck with the whatever those sunglasses are called.
Blades.
Yeah, the specific kind, and just the way his the Oakley sunglasses and the way his facial hair is, it's like, oh, okay, you're that guy now,
He's like beefy and sad eyes. Like you can see like the sadness and the regret behind him despite the almost robotic nature of his like, yes, ma'am. Like he's unerringly polite, but you can feel the sadness and the regret within him. So he's very good in this. I just wish that the script stuck with him. So I'm saying 5.4 is my number.
I said straight up 5. Yeah. I think there's things to like here, but it doesn't hold together.
Okay, so 5.2 is our number, and Stillwater is available. It's got to be theaters because they made me go to a screening.
Yeah, ditto. No, it's Focus, so it's whatever Universal's window for screening is, and then it'll be streaming soon enough. So if you want to check it out, you have some options. Thanks for watching, everybody. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us at BeFastAllDay on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And such things going on at our Patreon page. We're talking about Ted Lasso, which is of course a delight. And our off the menu this month, we put out some choices of various Richard Donner films that at least 2 of us had never seen, and our subscribers chose the Donner cut of Superman 2. So while we're all waiting for the air cut of Suicide Squad, we at least have the Donner cut of Superman 2. We'll be talking about that exclusively on Patreon. So check that out at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. Christy, this is normally what I throw to you for Marvel Mondays, but
I don't have anything until Shang-Chi comes out.
Okay, there we are. All right, well, so enjoy the rest of your summer, everybody. We'll see you guys next week. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.